All right, welcome back to Hauling the Mail with Will and John. Will, NASCAR has just concluded its weekend at Phoenix International Raceway along with IndyCar, who was a special guest, if you
Yeah.
will, as part of a joint weekend. And we had a pretty interesting couple of races from the NASCAR side, especially the Cup Series race won by Ryan Blaney. Featured a lot of similar themes that we saw to last year's season-ending race, which was won also by Ryan Blaney, including a bunch of tire blowouts and not nearly as much controversy this time, but
Nope.
on the whole, still a pretty interesting race weekend.
I think for Phoenix standards, it was the most interesting weekend we've had there in a long time. I mean, it kind of had it all. We had some tire wear, we had some passing, we had a few wrecks, we had battles for the lead, we had some strategy. Overall, I was very pleased with what we got out of Phoenix. Some very good racing, considering what we've gotten there in recent memory.
So, for the last few years, up until I think it was 2 years ago at this race, the spring race is where they introduced the option tire, which was the more aggressive, softer compound.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've had some more interesting racing. The tire wear, like you had mentioned, has been a little more extreme. And then the one difference this year, besides obviously the change in format, maybe changing strategies somewhat, there was a difference in horsepower, increased horsepower to 750, which created even more tire wear than maybe we were expecting, at this point a year ago. Now, that being said, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we actually go through the race in general, the teams had a lot to do with the tire failures that we did see. But like you said, it was a compelling race at Phoenix, something that we haven't really seen a lot of, throughout most of our lifetimes. I mean, I think it was Jamie McMurray who once said that they haven't had a good race there since '89, and I believe that's when the track opened.
That's when it was built. Yeah.
So, I mean, the fact that we're now 4 weeks into the NASCAR season, especially on the Cup side, and I can't really think of a bad race so far. In fact, I think all of them have been, at worst, good. I think that's a great way to start now that we're a month into the year.
Yeah. No, I think Coda was definitely the hardest one maybe to get through in terms of excitement value, but there was enough to that race that the racing purists can enjoy it. And the same thing with this one, right? I think it had a little bit of everybody. We got someone other than Tyler Reddick to win the race, so that always kind of perks the crowd up a little bit when you get a little bit of parity in there. Now, don't get me wrong, Ryan Blaney's not an unusual winner. He's probably top 5, one of the most talented guys in the sport, if I had to put my thumb on it. So it's not surprising to see him win, but it is always nice to see a fresh race in victory lane on the season. So overall, I think it was a good weekend.
And then on the O'Reilly side, it was Justin Allgaier who won. We had talked a bit previewing this race weekend on our show last week, which has now become more or less lost media, that Allgaier, although he has dominated and led a lot of laps at Phoenix, he has not won all but one other time in his O'Reilly Series career. So, and the way he went about it was kind of different from what we typically expect of him. But all in all, you look at the two winners this weekend, I think you could say it was a good race for Phoenix standards. And, it's another step in what has been a good start to the 2026 season in both series.
Yeah. No, I think the O'Reilly series cleaned up a lot this week. We got really good racing, some good passing, good strategy. I know we'll get into that more. But to speak to your comment before of lost media, for those wondering, we did make an episode last week. We had some technical difficulties. We also had some timing issues. So that media is not lost completely. It is still on Spotify. We had some video issues, so we weren't able to post a full video on YouTube. But if you are interested to hear what we had to say about Coda, you can still check that out over on Spotify. And you may or may not have heard someone predict both races correctly. We'll get into that a little more later.
I was going to say, you couldn't save that for later? You got to drop that in now?
No. Oh, I left it a tease as to be like, one of us got them both right. I wonder who. Big mystery.
Yeah, I guess we're really not leaving much to the imagination there.
I know you
But
can't see the hat there, but that is a Justin Allgaier hat. The camo
yes,
blinds it.
indeed.
You get it.
So
Anyway, we'll
let's
talk
get
all
into some
about it.
hot laps then. Yeah.
And right before we do, let's tease the folks a little bit. We're obviously going to do some hot laps. We're going to talk some race winners. We're going to update you on the Alex Bowman situation. Talk a little bit of NASCAR, if you will. We'll get into the series races. We, as always, first class, return to sender. And this week we're going to be doing another NASCAR draft. And stay tuned. We're going to be picking some Penske paint schemes. Some all-time Penske paint schemes. So just
It was a
stay
Penske
tuned.
weekend after all.
It was a Penske weekend after all. So stay tuned for that. With that, John, let's get into some hot laps. All right. So, as we mentioned before, Ryan Blaney wins at Phoenix. He outlasts Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Ty Gibbs to win his first race in the season. It was an eventful Straight Talk Wireless 500. We talked about it before. Lots of passing, lots of tire wear. Ryan Blaney had to overcome a lot of issues to work through the field a few times, but he ultimately pulls off the win. It's his 18th career victory and his second at Phoenix Raceway. Justin Allgaier won a thrilling GovX 200 race in the O'Reilly Series. He, too, made some late moves to get past the race-dominant Jesse Love, and that would be Justin Allgaier's third win at the racetrack. And now...
My mistake.
Yeah, we were close. And Allgaier is now the only driver with all top 10s so far in the season through 4 races. We mentioned Alex Bowman before. He was sidelined this weekend for his hometown race at Phoenix due to a lingering issue with vertigo. This just came about last week during COTA, John. And the team at the time, and at least to this moment as I've read, has not given a timetable for his return. They have stated publicly that the ride is his when he is healthy enough to return. And as of this recording, he is on the entry list for Las Vegas. But they've not announced any confirmation or anything like that. There's speculation on Twitter that he could be missing some time, but until Hendrick announces it themselves, I'm going to understand it as he's racing still. And then in the courts, we have JGR versus Chris Gabehart. That's another lingering problem. We had it revealed over the weekend, John, that it turns out JGR was hiring some private eyes to investigate and tail Chris Gabehart after the completion of last year's season. A little bit of sneaky stuff going on there. They're also, according to JGR, they stated that they had conducted some kind of exit interview between team president Dave Alpern and Gabehart. And in said meeting, Gabehart declined that he had discussed any employment with Spire. But then apparently Alpern had to ask Gabehart why his wife may have flown on the Spire plane to get to the Phoenix race last fall. I know travel accommodations can be difficult for NASCAR teams. There's a lot of people to fly around, so I'm not going to pretend that that's weird behavior, but
They obviously look.
Certainly coincidental, I think, at the least.
If they're hiring a private investigator to kind of check in on what he's doing, they clearly thought he was up to no good. And whether or not he was, that is to be determined, but NASCAR does not fail to disappoint once again. It's basically a running series at this point. The only question is who will be next.
Yeah. And, at first maybe this seemed like something that was a little bit emotionally driven, but now I think as some details are starting to unfold, I don't personally have a side in all this, but I do think it's starting to look like JGR is pretty serious about this and that this isn't just they're emotionally driven by Gabehart leaving them for a different team. I think they really feel like they have something worth fighting for here. So
I think it is also emotionally driven though too.
Well, sure, but I mean, I believe they had an opportunity to settle last weekend and couldn't quite do so.
There's always an opportunity to settle.
Right, and it sounds to me like they're going to let it ride for now. So there is I don't know the exact date, but there is a hearing scheduled for March in the coming weeks. So that'll be coming up between the two teams. So we're not done with this anytime soon. So, with that, John, let's get into some. Let's talk some Cup Series. Let's get into it. Let's unpack it a little bit.
Okay, so obviously we just touched on the kind of opening in the opening there that Ryan Blaney wins, but it was not, and this is actually kind of the case with both the winners this past weekend, is it wasn't a sort of flag-to-flag domination for either of these two guys. But in Ryan Blaney's case, I think you would look at kind of his performance throughout the day, and really Team Penske as a whole, because all three of their cars had speed. Even Josh Berry was, he qualified towards the front of the field as kind of like a fourth Penske car.
Yeah.
But Ryan Blaney kind of put on a clinic in the sense that he has long shown that he is one of, if not the best long run driver in NASCAR on ovals. And Christopher Bell, he's the one that dominated the race, but it wasn't like Ryan Blaney was slow by any means. He's probably the only other guy that was in his class, relatively speaking, on Sunday.
Yeah, we're talking about probably the two fastest cars on Sunday, without a doubt. The two guys that were part of the conversation pretty much all day, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell. You mentioned it wasn't a dominant race on either side. Both of them had their issues. I believe Blaney had a loose tire at least once.
He went to the back. He had a
he went to
he had a loose
twice,
tire.
Right?
I know for sure he did at least once, because he did that thing where he parked it in Logano's pit stall
And
after
had
his
them
pit
tighten the
stop.
lug.
Yep. So that's basically like a penalty to go to the rear. And I think it might have happened again a second time. And I know for Allgaier, he started further back, and he had a bunch of issues and didn't really get to the front till like 10 laps to go. But yeah, this was a case of, at least as far as Blaney goes, where, and that's the thing, I had just mentioned the long runs. There really weren't a ton of long runs. I mean, the first stage was entirely green, but it was just one of those things where he did a great job of passing on a track where it's traditionally really tough to pass. And like you said, Christopher Bell dominated this race. He didn't have the same setbacks, but these two drivers have been the best performers at Phoenix over the last 2 years. I mean, Bell had won this race 2 years in a row, the spring race, and Blaney had won the most recent race at Phoenix and had won a championship at this racetrack 2 years ago when he finished second to Ross Chastain. So, and I think per average finish at this track, he had the best in the next gen era. So these were clearly the two best drivers, the two best teams at this track, and they put on a show, relatively speaking, despite everything else that was going on around them in terms of like all the tire failures. But yeah, Blaney had to overcome a lot, and at the end, the two tire call paid off for him.
It was the one. Yeah, so for reference, for those who may not have noticed, late in the race we had a caution, and it brought up the strategy idea of, well, we need to pit for tires potentially to get so that we don't get chewed alive if we take the track position. Blaney and a few others took 2 tires, and Christopher Bell, who was leading at the time, took 4. John, I was explaining this to someone over the weekend that I was hanging out with about, and he's not too familiar with NASCAR, and my explanation to him on what that meant was like, imagine a team has the lead in the fourth quarter, and instead of kicking the field goal, they went for the touchdown, didn't convert, and then couldn't recover. That's kind of what the going for the 4 tires was. We're gonna take the 4. We're gonna lose some spots, and we're gonna chew them up on whatever. And just didn't work out. I mean, he didn't have long enough. I think if we didn't get that very last caution there where no one pitted, then I think he might have had a chance to get to him. Because Christopher Bell mentioned at the end of the race that he needed a few more green flag laps, and he think he could have had him. I don't remember exactly how many we ran in yellow in that last caution, but it chewed up quite a bit.
I'm looking at the timeline right now on NASCAR.com. The caution was thrown at lap 287, and again, there's 312 laps for this race. So Austin Dillon loses a right rear tire, and then they threw the caution. They got back going on lap 294, and then I think they didn't even manage a full lap or something like that. And then that's when the Zane Smith John Hunter Nemechek, Ty Dillon crash happened, or it happened 2 laps later. So that cut down, because not just did they lose 2 laps, but they also lost 6 more laps under caution because the race restarted at lap 301. So that left 11 laps for Bell after, if that wreck doesn't happen, he has 17 laps as opposed to 11. So,
Okay.
and with how quickly this track was eating up tires, again with the added horsepower that we were talking about, that very much could have made a big difference. So yeah, I mean, it not only do you need to be good sometimes, you need to be lucky. And both of these guys, as we touched on, were very good. And Blaney, for as unlucky as he was early in the race, he also got the right break at the end.
Yeah, he sure did, and it didn't come without work. He didn't just inherit the lead. He had to race Kyle Larson and Ty Gibbs for it. And I thought Ty Gibbs was doing all he could to defend the spot, but just you weren't gonna hold off that guy forever. I mean, Blaney was moving.
Gibbs, I believe, had older tires, and for a guy that has had a lot of criticism lately and has not won a race yet, Gibbs, he hasn't led a ton of laps in his Cup Series career. I remember back to when Daniel Suarez was leading in one of the first Next Gen races at Auto Club, and there was a late restart, and it was like, hey, he doesn't have a ton of experience up front. And I know this is a bit different because Gibbs has a lot more experience in the lower series, and he also has had much more success in terms of like running more consistently up front in a Gibbs car. However, he's not necessarily used to having to defend against someone charging for the win in the final closing stages of a race. Yeah. So I thought that was a lot for him to defend, but he came out with a top 4 finish. But yeah, it was.
He didn't wreck anybody doing it. I think that was a big one. He didn't take himself or anybody else out doing it. He did it clean, and while he did get beat, like you just said, that's a good experience for him to try and get used to being in positions like that, because that's the only way you're going to get better at those, to defend guys like Ryan Blaney who are so good at this track.
And this is a guy who is, and Gibbs, that has struggled a lot with consistency over his Cup Series career, and having a good finish like this. And I mean, you heard it in the post-race interview afterwards, which, there's some things he said kind of intentionally, I'm sure, but it's a confidence builder, and I'm sure he's been down on himself a lot over the last few years. So I think that was a big deal for him. It was a big deal for all the JGR cars besides Chase Briscoe that they were able to come through with a good finish, because obviously they'd been shown up by Tyler Reddick in 2311 Racing because they'd been wrecking and not getting the results that they needed while Tyler Reddick was winning and Bubba Wallace was finishing up towards the front. So for JGR, even though they didn't win this race, it was definitely something that you look at and you say, on the whole, outside of Chase Briscoe, this was a good day.
Yeah. And speaking of the day, if we flip it over to the Hendrick side of things, right now they're on record. They know they're not great at Phoenix. They're not as good as they want to be. And up until this year, it was probably a pretty great priority due to the championship race that they prioritized getting better there. And I think for today, I don't know if they kind of stopped doing that, but we've seen some struggles, right? Chase Elliott kind of had some poor luck today. Kyle Larson ran P3, but if you listen to his radio at all throughout the weekend, you'd have thought he was driving a go-kart out there. They were not. He was miserable in that car. And William Byron, while he finished okay, I don't think, for a guy that, you had predicted to win, and I think we all agreed was a contender for the race, never really kind of came to be that way. And he had his own struggles. So you had mentioned the new body for Chevy has just not been as fast. I mean, is it too early to be worried? You think?
Yeah, it's too early. Yeah. So here's the thing, and I should have taken this into account when making my picks, but this was the first time we were going to see the new Chevrolet body at Phoenix, and frankly, I'm going to kind of expand this to more of a Chevrolet talk because, Hendrick is the flagship Chevrolet team. Chevrolet as a whole led 1 lap on Sunday. It was by William Byron. And I feel like most of
Goodness.
the day, especially in the early going, it
Mhm.
was Daniel Suarez, Carson Hocevar, and even to an extent at the end, Michael McDowell, who had showed pretty solid speed. And yeah, the Hendrick guys had a couple decent results, no doubt. Larson finishing third and Byron seventh was definitely a good result for them. But yeah, I think we've seen with this new Chevrolet body, and it's important to remember that when Toyota and Ford came out with their new bodies in 2000, I believe 23 or 24, I think it was 24, that they had struggled a bit, especially Ford out of the gate. I remember like midway through 2024, I think they didn't win a race until like Texas or Charlotte or something like that. I
Mhm.
can't remember exactly what it was, but it took a long time for them to win a race. So, am I concerned? Not yet. That being said, if we go another 4 weeks, especially we're going to Las Vegas where Hendrick has been pretty good. If we go to other tracks and they're still not showing race winning type of speed, I'll be a bit concerned then. But for the time being, I'm not concerned just yet.
And real quick before we wrap up Cup Series talk with the standings, did you catch a look at that Austin Cindric wreck?
Yeah, oh yeah, that was a violent wreck, and
Brutal.
I mean he pounded the wall hard. And was it him or Alfredo that got a little bit of air there?
I think Alfredo got into him. I think Alfredo had a little bit of air, but he got into Cindric and it gave him a lot of air, and he practically bunny hopped right into the wall.
Yeah, I mean he went
It was
like
quite large. I
it was
kind
like
of
he was lifting
almost
off
knocked the
right
wind
into the
out of
wall.
myself watching it. It was
I mean,
heavy.
yeah, it was like he was lifting off right
Yeah.
into the wall. I mean that was a violent collision, and for a guy like Cindric who has had speed at a couple of these races this year and won a stage at Atlanta, it's been a tough start to the season for him. And frankly,
Hmm.
I know that Blaney was able to win the race, but you look at Cindric and Logano, I think they're going to look back at this as a pretty big missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Right
What you
now,
make of the
Logano,
Logano thing?
just an error on his part. I think once he lost track position, that car wasn't nearly as good as it was
Right.
in cleaner air. And I don't know if it was something that he was just struggling with, but that was just a simple. It looked like just a pretty simple mistake on his part. And going forward, he's obviously gonna do his best to make sure that doesn't happen. And frankly,
I know.
for even though Logano's an aggressive driver, I don't feel like I'm used to him seeing mistakes like that take out other drivers and himself. Normally, if he's taking out drivers, it's like at turn one at Circuit of the Americas when he's sending it from 6 rows deep or
Like he's
something
playing a
like that.
video game.
Yeah, where he's trying to use the car in front of him as his
Yeah.
brakes instead of his own. But no, you,
Yeah.
you don't typically see that, so that was kind of unexpected. But again, for those two guys, I mean, Logano's not in bad shape at seventh in the points, but for Cindric,
Hmm.
he's back. Where is Cindric?
Cindric's going to be towards the bottom because that boy is wrecked out just about every week
He
so
is
far. He is
30th.
30th. Yep.
Ouch. Yeah,
Yep.
that one hurts a lot for him right now.
Yep.
So
So speaking of the
any
points,
yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say, is there anything
yeah.
else notable on here? I
So
mean,
just looking at the points, I will say some notables. Obviously, Tyler Reddick still leads this thing. Ryan Blaney jumps a couple spots with his win. We see Bubba Wallace and Chase Elliott take a step down. Elliott had a rough day. Bubba Wallace kind of had an up and down day, but he still managed a pretty good finish. Some notables: Shane Van Gisbergen still lingers without a win in fifth in the
having a
standings.
great
Through
start
four
to the
starts,
season for
2
him.
top 10s, 16 stage points. I mean, the guy's in there. He's hanging around. Christopher Bell, obviously, he jumped a boatload of spots. He gained 19 stage points and finished second. So he
Plus
was
18 overall in the standings.
Yeah.
So he's the biggest winner, no doubt.
Yep, he's certainly climbed into contention again. Some other interesting names you see up in here. You got Michael McDowell in eighth. He's got a boatload of stage points. Chris Buescher, against all odds, has 23 stage points on the year. That might equal what he had last year, because that boy was ignorant to stage points up until this year.
Allergic.
And I would say, some notables. You have a couple. The Spire guys, they're right there. They're lingering. I mean, Daniel Suarez is the first guy out of the chase right now.
This is
Brad
another guy
Kay
that
dropped
had
a couple spots.
that was another one with a missed opportunity. He was I think
He said
started
after practice he had an absolute hot rod. He said it's one of the best cars he's ever had there.
Man, that's a bummer for him
Yeah.
because he was fastest in practice too, and I think he was top 5 in lap average too. So to only
Mm-hmm.
walk out of there with a 30th place finish and losing all those spots, that hurts too.
Yep.
Other big losers too. I mean,
We got
obviously, I was just gonna say it was funny to see that Cindric actually gained a spot despite what happened. But
craziness.
I mean, the biggest loser has to be, well, besides Alex Bowman, who is not active right now, it has to be Chase Briscoe, right?
It is, and we'll get into him more later. Teaser alert for Return to Sender. We'll kind of dig into his problems, but yeah, you're looking at guys like Chase Briscoe who are way out of the picture right now. Josh Berry, Austin Cindric. Another guy that kind of took a hit this week was Ross Chastain. He is in 23rd overall. He lost 3 more spots this weekend. He's having a hard time finishing off these races. They've had speed. They've had a hard time finishing. So that's where we stand on the cut points. We can go ahead and get into some O'Reilly talk now. We'll talk about O'Reilly for a couple minutes. So, John, coming off a Sunday, we talked about it before, Justin Allgaier steals the win, if you will, away from Jesse Love and company. This was a race that was kind of dominated all day by that 2 car. He was up front for a great majority of the day, and there was a steady mix of other guys that were kind of in the mix, but it felt like all day it was the 2 car to beat. We get late in the race, and a couple cautions come out, shuffle up some field position. We get a late one, and Justin Allgaier surges and steals the win. What was your feel on this race?
Will, I thought about this race and as it was unfolding, and then especially at the end, I kind of thought about 2 races in particular. First, when Jesse Love was leading the majority of the night, I was thinking a lot about the most recent race there, where Love didn't start out front, but he worked on his car, and then by the end of it, he was clearly the best out there, and he just dominated en route to what became his championship run. But as far as the other thought I had, especially at the end, was that it was kind of an inverted race to what we saw here in the spring 2 years ago. And I'll refresh your memory and everyone else's memory. 2 years ago in the spring race, Justin Allgaier, I don't know if he won both stages, but he dominated the race at Phoenix. He led the most laps. I'm fairly certain he won at least one stage and had more stage points than anyone else. He was leading, by a handful of seconds with less than 20 to go. He then has a tire go down, backs it into the fence, and loses out on what would have been, for him, an easy win. And this time it was kind of the opposite, where he started in the back, he worked his way up a bit, and then had some setbacks. Never really felt like it wasn't going to be his night, and then finally they got the car right, towards the latter half of the final stage, and then he made the pass on Jesse Love with, I think, 12 to go, coming to 11 to go, something like that. Mm-hmm. He hadn't led it all night until then, but his car was at its best at that time. And, I know that he ended up with 14 stage points, but it wasn't like – this was not the typical Justin Allgaier experience at Phoenix. And for him to kind of come through and steal the win, as you said, I think that was pretty impressive on the part of him and his team. And just goes to show you not all performances are made equal, if you will. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of races Justin Allgaier has not won at this track that he probably deserved to win. This one was kind of the opposite of that, so in a way it kind of balances the scales for him. So definitely an entertaining kind of position if you're just watching for Justin Allgaier. You had a bit of a roller coaster night, but obviously it ended well, so that works out for you. But
it's not about leading all the laps; it's about leading the last one.
I mean,
it's the one that matters.
Yeah, but I thought it was a good race overall. I thought this was a bit more standard of a race for the O'Reilly series at Phoenix. I mean, they're not having the same sort of increase in horsepower, tires, and stuff like that. But again, I never felt like the O'Reilly series had bad races here compared to what we're used to.
And I think with that race, we did see the clean air did have a little bit of an effect. I kind of was psyched out by the Sammy Smith experience. He looked like he was the fastest guy.
What happened there?
He was the fastest guy on the track, man. I mean, stage
In the
one, he
first
goes out there,
stage,
he gets to the front, and he takes off. And Allgaier even said over the radio to his spotter, he's like, that 8 car, man, that's the car to beat. We get to the end of the first stage. He wins stage one, and they pitted, and their pit kind of took a little bit longer than everybody else, and not too much longer, not like horrible, but just a little bit longer. So he came out like fourth, fifth, and then he just, when they got kind of mired in traffic, that was it. It just kind of shuffled them back, and then they never quite recaptured that speed and that dominance from that first run. So I mean,
I wonder.
he still finished okay. It just like it was kind of surprising. He looked like the 2 car and the 7 looked like those were going to be the 3 dogs in the fight through that first stage, and then the 8 kind of just tailed off towards the end. And the two was a little back and forth, but he was always just kind of right there in the mix.
I wonder. I wonder how much the changing from day to night kind of had an effect on this race.
Sure.
I don't I don't recall that happening. Yeah, that didn't happen in the Cup race because it was earlier in the day. But in the O'Reilly race, perhaps the changing of temperature, with the sun going down, perhaps that had an effect on it. But yeah, I mean, when he rocketed through it in the first stage, I was like, oh, Sammy Smith is, he's a former winner at Phoenix. I was like, he's gonna have a good day here. But obviously, didn't come to pass. But
yeah, the one was fast too.
I was going to say
kind of in the mix for a while. The 88 JRM was never really there.
Yeah, which is funny because you think about all the JRM cars, and it's like, okay, the guy piloting the All-Star Cup car in the 88 that finished second here with Alex Bowman a year ago and is being manned by a guy who has won at Phoenix in the Cup Series. You're like, all right, William Byron's going to be in good shape. It felt like the team never had the car in a good spot. I think he did a good job of kind of wheeling that thing to an okay result, but yeah, definitely not as fast as the 2 full-time teammates he has plus the 1 car. Quapple led a few laps in this race, and I know they had mentioned it on the broadcast that I'm blanking on the crew chief, Rodney Childers. They were talking about how, this was kind of his first opportunity to really shine with what he has accomplished in cars more like this as opposed to the next-gen car. And for Quapple, a guy who really struggled at this race back in the fall, I think he was in the teens most of the day. Definitely an improvement compared to what we saw, so that was a big deal. Just trying to think about other guys up front. The Haas factory cars were fast again, so my preseason concerns about where are they going to fall in the pecking order in Chevy, they seem to be right where they were last year, and if anything, it's more helpful for them because now they have more drafting teammates at super speedways. So if anything,
a few more friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a good move for them so far.
You weren't going to have any with Ford.
No, I thought for a minute Sheldon Creed was going to win again when he was restarting late, but I think the adjustments they made on that final restart weren't really good for his car. That seemed to be upset. Couldn't get the good grip, but. And then just other guys. I mean, Jordan Anderson Racing had a great day with Jeb Burton and Raja Karuth at 7th and 8th. Corey Day had a nice kind of bounce back performance.
Quiet day. It was a quiet day, which is important.
A quiet day is a good day for Corey Day. So.
And JGR was another one. We saw JGR kind of take over in practice and qualifying, if you will, and then we get into the race, and they had some short run speed, and they were there. They were lingering until 3 of them all went out in the same wreck, it seemed. The one that totaled William Sawalich kind of included 3 of them.
Yeah.
I think all but the Brent Cruz car was involved in a wreck, so that was kind of a disappointing end to a day that had a lot of promise going into the afternoon.
Yeah, and this Gibbs O'Reilly kind of setup has been kind of interesting because it's 3 young drivers and 1 rookie in Cruz, minus 4 races this year, and then Brandon Jones, who has been a stable veteran who's won a handful of races in the series. But this was a kind of a race I would have expected a bit more, but if the Toyotas at Joe Gibbs Racing are going, then it's basically just a Chevrolet show because there's 3 Fords in this field, and if it's not a JGR Toyota, you're talking about, 2 Sam Hunt racing cars that have not had a great start to the year. So it was all Chevrolets at the front. So if you like the bow ties, you had a good day.
It's likely going to stay that way. With only 2 real manufacturers participating in this series, it'll probably be that way.
And that's, it's like one is, if we're talking about the pie chart, one is like 80% of it, if not
Right.
more, and then you've got Toyota with like 6 full time, and then you've got Ford with like 2, and then it's like,
Should just
okay,
be
occasionally we'll have a
the
third.
Chevy series plus JGR.
We gotta figure that out, and
Yeah,
that'll be a conversation.
Ford's got to get involved. Maybe Ram too, or Dodge, or
Yeah,
whoever.
yeah, and
Kind of mix
that's
things up a little bit.
and maybe that's a topic for another day. But
Sure.
yeah, all in all, a good race at Phoenix. Depending on what you like. If you like more chaos, I think you would have liked yesterday's Cup race better. If you liked more straightforward racing, then you probably liked Saturday night's race. If you liked, I'll be honest though, if you liked just great racing overall, I think you would have liked the IndyCar race Saturday during the day better than both of these races. I don't know if you got to watch it at all.
I did not. I was at a baby shower on Saturday. I did not get an opportunity. Or not Saturday. I was at a birthday party Saturday. But yeah,
Gotcha.
I did not get a chance to see it.
I know we're a NASCAR podcast, but I will say
We're a racing podcast. It's okay.
I was going to say there are not many things I find more exhilarating as a racing fan than watching IndyCar racing, not just on ovals, but I would say more specifically like intermediate to short ovals.
Did it keep the pack close together, like were they kind of really on top of each other?
No, but here's the thing: when you're racing that quickly around a track that's only 1 mile, you're never really going to get that far from anyone.
Sure.
And just like the again, I'm not super dialed into IndyCar, but like the other 2 races this weekend, you had a guy who dominated that race in Christian Rasmussen, only for him to be passed in the closing, few laps. I think there was like 7 to go, something like that. And then Joseph Newgarden, who always seems to win on ovals, made the pass late after taking tires on a critical late stop. I mean, all of a sudden Phoenix is putting out bangers all the time, and Newgarden goes on to win the race. So, I mean, just,
Nice.
Again, not, we're more NASCAR centric here, but a great weekend at Phoenix considering what we've been used to over the last few years, or most of the time we've ever seen NASCAR racing at Phoenix. But all in all, this was a pretty good weekend. And I don't know if you had this topic on, Will, but since I brought up IndyCar, what do you think about like these combined weekends? What is your opinion on them?
I don't dislike them. If I get the opportunity to, I mean, we're busy guys, so we do everything we can to watch what we can observe so we can talk on the show. And if I can get time, if they have the pairing of these weekends, I will try and watch it. I don't dislike it. I think it's certainly good for IndyCar to kind of pair up with NASCAR and try and get in on that weekend. I wasn't at the racetrack. I don't know if it made the racetrack experience better or worse. But
sounds like there was a lot of a big number for attendance as far as the IndyCar race. We know that the NASCAR race always does well, and then conversely, if you want to circle back to St. Pete the week before, I had listened to a podcast for an IndyCar podcast, and they brought up, hey, look, like normally on Saturdays the suites at the St. Pete track are not busy or full at all, and they were last Saturday when the Truck Series raced there. So you had a great pairing with the trucks and IndyCar at St. Pete, and then you had another great kind of. I kind of view it as like the rising tide lifts all ships, and I don't know that you want to do it, especially if you're IndyCar, because you're your own premier series. I don't know that you want to do this all the time, but I think if you did this maybe 2 or 3 times a year, once at an oval, maybe once at a road course or something.
Yeah,
I think it'd be awesome. Like for me, I'm just thinking like I'd love to see IndyCars race at Richmond the same weekend that Cup cars do, because that's a very high tire wear track.
Yeah,
and they'll whip around that track really quickly. So I mean, before the repave at Iowa, IndyCar put on great races there. So I think that would be wonderful. But I'm
not against it. I think it's definitely it's more helpful for IndyCar than it is for NASCAR, but that's okay. That's not a huge deal, and I know this is a big deal for Fox because they're they're the broadcaster kind of. They've really got a big stake in IndyCar, so it's
I was going to
hugely
say they
important for
literally
them.
own part of IndyCar, yeah.
So I know it means a lot to them to try and present that to the NASCAR audience, which is loyal and pulls in the big numbers. So I don't dislike it. I don't need it every week, but I can appreciate when they do it. Like I think it's nice to kind of broaden your horizons and try and experience a different form of motorsport just to see it. So if they ever did it around here, I wouldn't be against trying to be a part of that, trying to see it.
Yeah, like I'd seen some people floating the idea of like, hey, like what if there was a weekend where like a festival of motorsport where you had NASCAR, IndyCar, and IMSA at one like track. Like for our sake, let's just say Watkins Glen.
Not F1.
Well, not a place where they're what is it called, like clipping or whatever, where they're decelerating on straights. Like that's not good. I mean, it was wild to think about how everyone was just dunking on F1 over the weekend. You know, you got NASCAR. I'm not just talking about like random people online. Like Chip Ganassi Racing's Twitter account was just throwing shade at F1 and their clip saving stuff, and not just them. I'm not just talking about them either. Like there was a European. I sent you the tweet today. It was like a European GT4 racing series throwing shade at F1. I've never seen anything like that before.
It's crazy.
The entire motorsport community was like, "We're gonna bring you down a peg." That was pretty crazy.
Come back down to planet Earth with the rest of us.
Yeah, I guess so. But
all right, John.
We've gone off track enough here.
That's okay. That's what this is all about. That's what we're doing here. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to do some first class and return to sender, and then we'll pick some Penske paint schemes. How about it? If you want to see more content from Hauling the Mail, we are currently on TikTok, X, YouTube, and Spotify. You can catch our full-length episodes on Spotify with the name Hauling the Mail, on YouTube at Hauling the Mail Racing Podcast. If you want to see tweets and more up-to-date information and sometimes some race updates, you can follow us on Twitter at hauling_mail. And to see clips and extracurricular videos, we are on TikTok at hauling.the.mail. This week's episode is sponsored by Amanda's Riverside Bar and Grill, located on Winterdale Road in Starlight, Pennsylvania. Delicious food, cold beer, and excellent company. Summer fishing is just around the corner, and you can make Amanda's Riverside Bar and Grill a nightcap after a nice day of fishing on the Delaware River. So thank you and shout out to Amanda's Riverside Bar and Grill for sponsoring today's show.
All right, it's time for first class and return to sender. First class is who we're thrilled about. Guys or teams that we're excited about. Return to sender, we are voting down. We don't like that. Get it out of here. So first class for me today, Will. I have Andrew Overstreet. If you aren't familiar with that name, Andrew Overstreet, he is the crew chief for Justin Allgaier. He has not been Justin Allgaier's crew chief for very long. As a matter of fact, this is only his second full-time season as a crew chief at the O'Reilly Series level. He has crew chiefed after this weekend a total of 57 races in the O'Reilly Series and one at the Truck Series level. This is only his second win, believe it or not, Will. His first win came with Connor Zilic 2 years ago. I believe that was at the Watkins Glen race when Zilic made his O'Reilly, then Xfinity Series debut. But he had made a handful of crew chiefing starts, if you want to call it that, with extra guys like Sam Mayer when he was a rookie, Bubba Pollard, Carson Quapple, even did one with Dale Earnhardt Jr. 2 seasons ago. But we had touched on it when we were talking about the O'Reilly Series race review that Justin Allgaier was not thrilled with his car. He wasn't very happy. I know that he was still running relatively close to up front, but he wasn't leading laps. And by the end of the race, they had adjusted on the car. He knows what he needs. So at that point, it's about, for Andrew Overstreet, can you get the driver what he needs to make the magic happen? They were able to get the job done. Allgaier took the lead late and won. And for Overstreet, that's a big deal because, like I said, last year was his first full-time season with Carson Quapple as a full-time crew chief. So the fact that he was able to get Justin Allgaier his third win at Phoenix Raceway after so many times being able to put together a great race but not winning, this definitely has to be a big achievement for him. So,
Hmm.
big shout out on the first class performance by Andrew Overstreet this week.
Hell yeah. Sporting Justin Allgaier. Happy for that crew.
We're big
I
fans of that guy. Aside
Yeah.
from when he his uneven performances lead to headaches when he's on our fantasy teams.
Yeah, the fantasy angle can be frustrating, but I mean, always rooting for Lil Gator. My first class, John, is going to be this gentleman has the best average finish in the Cup Series right now outside of Tyler Reddick. In 4 races, he's got, I'll pull up the stats for you. In 4 races, he's got 3 top 10s, 40 stage points, which puts his total at 153. He's led 86 laps. Quite frankly, he was one move away from winning at Atlanta. And right now he finds himself P3 in the standings behind the 2 race winners so far this year, and that's Bubba Wallace. He has got the best average finish in the Cup Series right now, not named Tyler Reddick. Look, man, 23-11's been strong, right? The talk's been Tyler Reddick. It's about him winning all those races in a row and Michael Jordan. Bubba Wallace has quietly put himself in position to clinch playoffs. Before, I shouldn't say clinch playoffs, but like he's just for a guy that you're typically going to expect top 15s and occasional stage points and once in a blue moon maybe at a super speedway he'll contend for a win. He's doing this without necessarily contending for the win. I think Atlanta was the big race that he probably should have won. But you look at it, he's gotten stage points in every race. He's led laps in most of these races, and he's getting he was 10th, 8th, 11th, and 6th so far on the season. So his one non-top 10 was 11th, which is why his average finish is so high, which is at
And that and that was
8.8,
at and I was going to say that was at Circuit of the Americas where
which is
even
usually
five
not his strength.
yeah,
It's
5
the
years
road course.
ago, 5 years ago that was like or even like 4 years ago that was even like
Hmm.
his bugaboo, but he's
Yeah.
actually kind of turned that around. And yeah, he's not competing for wins by any means, but it's not an eyesore for him anymore. He can get the
No.
job done. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's put together a great year. And if I may, I know you were kind of asking the question earlier when we had talked off air about, is he a real kind of contender for the championship, right?
Is it too soon to say Bubba Wallace is a championship contender?
I'm still gonna say, like I said when talking about like where these Cup guys are in the standings, it is too early.
Hmm.
That being said, I think it's important to point out that when the championship format changed in the off season, we talked about guys like Shane Van Gisbergen, guys like Bubba Wallace, and it was like, hey, they're that part of what the playoffs was all about was giving guys who maybe weren't as consistent a chance to advance deeper and contend for a championship.
Hmm.
But here we are, a month into the year. I know that the races have been kind of wild cards with the super speedways and the road course, and even this was kind of a wild card to an extent with all the tire blowouts. But at a certain point, you have to look at what SVG and especially here with Bubba Wallace, look at what they're doing.
Hmm.
Man, it's impressive. So,
Yeah.
are they contenders, for a championship right now? No, but if they keep this up for another 5 weeks, when we have more of these mile and a halfs, traditional ovals, if they can at least put together solid performances,
Hmm.
think about the Chase Elliott top 20 streaks we talk about every year. You do that, you stay out of trouble, you're going to be in really good shape.
Yeah. Yeah. And for him, like I said before, it feels kind of funny to put someone first class because they're not contending for wins. But the fact is he's not in contention for a lot of these wins, and he's still in the position that he's in. And at least as it relates to Phoenix this week, it was a blue collar day for him. He had a pit road issue. I think he was too fast exiting or entering at one point, and he had to work through the field. And they had a quiet blue collar day. They avoided the nonsense, and they came through for another good top 10 finish with some stage points. And this is what these types of teams need to do. We are always talking about the big three and who's going to dominate and which manufacturer is going to be the guy to beat every week. But this 23-11 team, I shouldn't say quietly anymore because they've won 3 races and Bubba Wallace is top 3 in the points. but like they've quietly been better than JGR and better than Penske, other than maybe today with Blaney. This is not a team that's just flashing. They're consistently really good, whereas the big three is not right now. So I think there's big props to be had over there for Michael Jordan and company, kind of coming out of the gate hot and saying that we wanna participate, we want to be in this.
And even Riley Herbst is not the second worst car on the grid this year.
No.
Hooray for Riley.
And look, and he was an integral part of Tyler Reddick
the
winning
Daytona
the Daytona
500. True,
so
very true.
They're not discounting him over there either. But yeah, shout out to Bubba Wallace in 2311 and the start they've had so far.
And future Hall of Famer Corey Heim.
Lord willing. All right, John. Return to sender.
Return to sender.
It's time to disown some folks.
Disown. All right. We touched on it a bit earlier. I'm going to return the Chevrolet, performance at Phoenix at the Cup level to the sender with their new body. Not really performing to the standard that we all expect. And I know that this has not been their best circuit over the years, but, you wanted to see a bit more. That was kind of disappointing. And then the other one I wanted to mention for me personally was just the relationship between Kyle Busch and Richard Childress Racing. It sounds like things over the radio were not all that pleasant between them. And
it never is with Kyle Busch, but yeah, you're right.
No, and, we saw last year, or, at this most recent race in the fall, with all the tire, failures that we saw, a lot of times these teams are pushing the limits to get speed. Well, the problem with RCR and Kyle Busch's team in particular is not only were they blowing out tires a bunch and having these failures, they also were very slow. So they were getting the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
And Kyle Busch literally came over the radio and said, I don't know what else I can do to save tires right now. You're talking about a guy that's been in the Cup Series longer than anyone else at this point. I think he's the longest tenured Cup driver, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, and, when he came up racing in the Gen 4 era, you actually had to really save your tires. So,
right.
For when he's telling you, look, I don't know what to do, you're not in a good spot. And It seems like these two entities are headed for a divorce. I think that's been speculated on for a while. You look at Kyle Busch's numbers, there's been a clear decline since COVID, and then it became more pronounced after the first 12 races with RCR when he won 3 races, and it was like, this is going to be a great marriage. It's gotten worse in pretty much every year since then. He led only 88 laps last year, and although he had an average finish that was better than it was 2 years ago, he only had 3 top 5s last year. I mean, and only 10 top 10s. He's only had 20 top 10s since, his first year at RCR. He's had 37 since he got to RCR, which is now 3+ full seasons. So
yeah. At what level, John? Because you mentioned that this marriage is going bad between them and RCR and the change at COVID. For Kyle Busch's sake, it's very public, his distaste for this next gen car. And I don't know, I can understand how some of these guys have come out and they have their issues with the car, and it's understandable. But Kyle Busch seems to be the big one that goes, this car is junk, like we can't race this car. And I don't always disagree with him, but it's hard to roll with that when a lot of other guys have adjusted. Because, like you said, Kyle Busch's been doing this a long time, and I want to give him credit to be a guy that can do it, that can overcome it. But it just kind of feels like two immovable objects, the old wily veteran of Kyle Busch and this next-gen car, and it like you said, it's just not gotten better. And then they left JGR, and it still didn't, like he won a race with RCR that first year, and we haven't really...
He won 3.
We haven't seen relevance since. So I don't think it's impossible that he could be better with this car, because the constant thing is going to be, oh well, he's no good in this new next gen car. But it's like, to what end can we not sit here and say that he should have adjusted by now? because
Well, well,
everybody
look,
else has.
look, Will. You and I have talked about this a lot. We haven't really talked about this much on this podcast since we've started. I think this is kind of a pretty big indictment on Richard Childress Racing in general, because what
Sure.
happens when Kyle Busch races in the Truck Series? And I know that it's not the same competition level, but what happens when he races, his 5 races in the Truck Series every year? He usually
Right.
wins at least once, usually twice or more. And I know that it's the whole next gen car, but I think you have to look back at what Richard Childress Racing has been for a long time at the Cup Series level,
Since Harvick
especially.
left them, they've just been a step or two below the main Chevy guys, the Hendricks and the
Yeah,
whoever. So
and it
yeah.
gets masked by the fact that they have a terrific O'Reilly Series program, and
Hmm.
that's great for them. But you look at the Cup Series performance. I mean, Tyler Reddick had a 3-win season in the first year of the next gen. He left, and
Hmm.
then Busch won 3 races that year. But outside of that, both drivers, you look at Reddick, he's been far more successful since he left. Uh, I know that Busch hasn't had a huge sample size, but he was more consistent in his 1 year in the next gen with JGR. And, he's been everyone's favorite whipping boy for, a decade and a half now almost. But I think Austin Dillon, I think his performance against Kyle Busch in the time that they've been in the car together, on the same team, I think has shown that this team is probably holding them both back. And I think the conversations we've kind of seen bubbling under the surface with the Dillon brothers in general and their grandfather, and the way they've talked about, hey, you know, we have to kind of convince him to kind of do things a little differently. I think, we just talked about it with the whole Dale Earnhardt thing, Will. Are they kind of stuck in the past? We don't know how much, but there's kind of a general sense that they're a little behind the times.
Yeah.
And I think that that's spilled into their performance on the Cup side. So I think it's probably a good thing for them to probably get a divorce here at the end of the season, and maybe even sooner than that if things don't end up improving, because I just don't think it's working.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I don't see this ending in any more race wins for Busch. Not in that car.
Not
At least
unless
not right.
they
Not
kind of
right
fall
now.
into something.
Not unless they sweat one out at Talladega or Daytona later this year. Real quick before we get into race picks, my return to sender. I'm gonna go ahead and put the return label on Chase Briscoe right now. I like Chase Briscoe. I do. I think he's an insanely good race car driver, but the first month of the season has been horribly unkind to that guy. He's coming off of a Final Four trip with JGR there, and since then he's come out and he DNF'd in the Daytona 500, and he finished second, which is keeping him out of the complete pit of misery at Atlanta, but then consecutive 37th place finishes with no stage points. That brings him to 3 DNFs on the year out of 4 races, his average finish being 28th now. It's he currently sits, as I check my notes, he is 30. I just had it. He is 30th in standings, sub 30th.
I was going to say, outside of Alex Bowman, who's inactive right now,
Yeah,
it's got to be the most disappointing start. He's
tough.
one race at Atlanta away from
Atlanta
having
was the good
Josh.
one when he finished runner up.
If it weren't for that, he'd have the Josh Berry effect of last year at the
place.
start of the playoffs when he had 3 straight last place finishes.
Just
It's
pretty
bad.
remarkable. Yeah,
The
it
only
is.
good
And
news is it probably can't get much worse, right? Watch him DNF again.
well,
right,
you
I
got
guess,
Alex
but
Bowman, who's we're still waiting to see if he'll get back in the race car this week. But for Chase Briscoe, this is not going to be an easy hole to get out of, right? I mean, for their sake, one guy has won all the races, so the playoffs are still very much in the conversation. But I think the overwhelming consensus around the sport and the garage is that to really compete for the championship, you're going to need to be top 3 to be one of the main contenders going into the chase, or top 6 to realistically even have a shot. They were saying that if you're outside the top 6, you're going to need a pretty unbelievable run in the chase to kind of make a run for the championship. So for Chase Briscoe's sake, I'm rooting for it. I really like the guy, and I love seeing Bass Pro on the track. But that's a guy that's had a horrible start, and they're going to need to start combining a couple wins earlier in the year with some good finishes to kind of climb back into the conversation.
It's going to get early, late, or late, early. I had that backwards.
Yeah, yeah. All right,
You
John.
know what I mean.
Let's talk about the race picks real quick. I don't think there's a lot that needs to be said here.
No, I don't really have anything to say. I'm ready for next week.
I opened with a pick of Ryan Blaney on the Cup Series, and then you followed it up in our snake draft. You took Byron for both series, and I don't have the stats in front of me. I don't think he led a lap in either one of those races.
He led Chevrolet's only lap in the Cup Series. So.
Okay, so I stand corrected. But
Hang
Byron
the
finished
banner.
7th on Sunday. He finished 13th on Saturday. And then, lo and behold, I wrapped up the draft picking Little Gator, Justin Allgaier, in the O'Reilly Series. So, in an unprecedented run here, John, I picked both winners in the series correctly. Insert confetti. Congrats.
It's all downhill from here.
Yep. So,
But
that
no,
being
seriously,
said,
congratulations. That's awesome.
I wish I had thought to put money on it, but, what are you going to do? I think
Gamble
the minute I put
responsibly.
money, please gamble responsibly. But I think if I had done that, it would have jinxed it and probably killed it anyway. That being said, John, we got Las Vegas coming up this weekend. Once again, the Truck Series is off. So going into this week, I lead our pick'ems 3-1 here. I think it's pretty fair to say I won this week. So you'll get first pick here going into Las Vegas. We have an O'Reilly pick and we have a Cup pick. So
I'm going to start with the
your
Cup
heart's
pick.
desire. Okay.
I'm going to start with the Cup pick because I know you'd brought up entry lists, and we'll get into that a little bit in a moment. But I think there's several options in the O'Reilly series that are really interesting. But for the Cup series, I'll go with Christopher Bell. Bell has, I'm trying to think. Whoops, I had the wrong stats up. Christopher Bell has not won at this race yet, but he has the fourth best average finish among drivers who have raced at the Cup Series here since 2023. I'm using driveraverages.com as my source here. I know that he's been pretty close a couple times. I know he finished just behind Joey Logano. He was very fast last weekend, and I know that he will be highly motivated to correct that error of not being able to close out the win this week. So I'll go with Christopher Bell to get his first career win at Las Vegas. So you're up for two now.
Yeah. Christopher Bell's a good pick. I like that. If you're looking for the numbers, Christopher Bell in the last 8 races here at Las Vegas, he's got 5 top 10s, including 4 top 5s. He doesn't have a win, but he's sat on the pole for this race 3 times and an average finish of 12.6. That's not a bad pick. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I kind of waffled back and forth between 2 different guys, but the one that jumps out at me has won here twice. In the last 8 races, he's finished top 10 6 times. He's led 595 laps in 8 races, an average finish of 7.9. I'm going to go ahead with Kyle Larson. I'm not a big Kyle Larson guy, but I think for this sake today, I want to see if we can't keep the streak going.
I think if it were a week ago, I would have, but I'm now nervous. I just said I wasn't nervous, but for my picks, I'm a little nervous about Chevrolet with their new body.
Sure.
That's just where I'm at.
I'm going to double down in the O'Reilly series. I'm going to take a page out of your notebook, and we're going to double up because in the 88 JRM car here at Las Vegas, we've once again got Kyle Larson. So I'm going to double up. I'm going to be what's his nickname? Young Money?
Yeah.
Young Money. I'm going to be Young Money this weekend. So I'm going to double up on Kyle Larson. We'll see how that goes.
So there's some interesting names here as far as like looking at who to pick here. Obviously, you have the regulars here, but a couple names. You got Connor Zilic in the 1 this week. Carson Kvapil will be in the 9. Cole Custer will be in the Haas Factory Team Prepared number 0 car.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, this is a tough one. There were several names that I really liked here for this one. I'm not going to go Allgaier this week, even though he's statistically probably the best driver here, just because I feel like it's again the Hendrick Motorsports JRM. If it's straight up Larson v Allgaier, I will like Larson's chances better. I'll go with Cole Custer. He hasn't won here recently, but with
Picking
you
the
think about.
zero car, huh?
I am. I mean,
Okay.
think about how fast the 91 car was at Coda a couple weeks ago. A lot of it is the car you've got underneath you. Cole
Mm-hmm.
Custer, again using driveraverages.com, since 2023, since the start of the 2023 season, he has 4 O'Reilly Series races at Las Vegas. He has an average finish of 6.3. So
Wow.
I feel somewhat confident. I know it's a bit off the wall, and
Yeah.
if I get this one wrong, and I'll be down 4-1 to you, I'll probably stop making silly picks like this. But we're gonna just throw it off the wall
Hey
right
man, I
now.
went with Briscoe 2 weeks ago, and he quite literally blew up running P2 and ended that and finished last. So it
Is
happens
that
to all
is
of us.
yeah, I guess so. But
It's no big
yeah,
deal.
so why don't we just kind of touched on the the 2 races here. Why don't we talk a little bit more? Well, we can preview them a little bit and just see if there's anything else you wanted to add before we get to getting ready to wrap this up.
Sure. So let's see.
So the like you said, it's going to be a 2-race weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, the O'Reilly Series and the Cup Series. Nothing. The horsepower is going to go back down to the, I believe, 670 that it has been traditionally. We had talked a little bit about, some of the guys as far as our picks go. Again, Chevrolet with the new body.
Mm-hmm.
JGR won the most recent race with Denny Hamlin, and Joey Logano
Josh,
has won
I thought
before
Josh
too.
Berry
Josh
won.
Berry, that's right.
This was
That's
the race
right.
last year. Josh Berry got his first Cup Series victory.
So I feel like Las Vegas is of the 1.5 mile tracks. I feel like this one is the one of the hardest of the tri-ovals to pass at, and it feels like wind is typically a huge factor here. So, but it'll be our first kind of real taste of. I know that we said last week is the real start of the season, or that's kind of the joke, but this
Mm-hmm.
will be the first test of a bigger oval. So
Right.
I
Mile and
always
a
I
half.
always find
Yeah.
Vegas to be a pretty interesting race.
Yeah, Vegas in recent memory has been a relatively good race. And if you correct me if I'm wrong, John, I think it might be different now with the up horsepower, but this is the kind of race where if you had your setup right, you could pretty well almost be wide open through at least one of the turns.
Definitely in qualifying. I know
Yeah.
that in qualifying that these guys typically, at least at the cup level, they're usually holding it down most of the time. Now we'll see if the track has aged much, but I'm gonna guess it probably hasn't aged too much. But yeah, they can hold it wide open most of the way. I think
Hmm.
specifically in 3 and 4, if I'm not mistaken. Although I could be wrong. In any case, I'm sure we'll
I
find
think it's
out.
3 and 4
And
because one's a little bigger than 3 and 4. And I believe
and
the banking's 20 degrees here in Las Vegas.
yeah, I think it's progressive. Is it? No, I don't think it is progressive here, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me see.
But this is typically a race where we see the bigger teams flex their muscles.
Yep.
And again, that was the case this past weekend. So we talked a bit about Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, SVG, some of these, and Kyle Busch, some of these factory teams, if you will. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue the runs that
Mhm.
they've had to start the year. But
Yeah, and
that's more or less all I.
I think real quick, just for Las Vegas, you talk about the big teams coming through. You mentioned Chevy is still kind of working around their new body stuff. I think a name to keep an eye on this weekend is Chase Elliott. Not in terms of like, are they going to win the race? When you look at Hendrick, Hendrick as a whole, going into this race in the last 6, Kyle Larson, his average start has been 6th, and William Byron is 6th as well, and they average a top 10 finish. But if you look at Chase Elliott's numbers, his average start is 15th and average finish is 19th. So there's quite a big divide in terms of where the top 2 Hendrick cars seem to be going into this place versus where Chase Elliott is. And that's a team, and I know you and I have talked about it, and we're not going to divulge too much on the debate between Alan Gustafson or not. That's a team that hasn't been dominant, hasn't been winning, and I'm going to be very curious to see this weekend how relevant that 9 team is to the rest of the Hendrick picture, because we're still, I mean, I'm not going to expect too much from the 48 with the Vertigo stuff with Bowman, but for the 9 car, your top 5 in points, everyone's kind of expecting you to be the steady Eddie that contends for the championship, but I still do believe winning races is going to be a very big part of that, because of you're seeing it now in the standings, the big difference between Reddick and everybody else just from winning 3 races. All that's got to happen to Chase Elliott is they go 2 months without winning, and some of these other guys we were talking about, like the Briscoes of the world, or the other Penske or JGR guys, and he's going to continue to kind of transcend down. So I'm really kind of hoping to see if there's any improvement in speed this weekend for Elliott comparative to his Hendrick teammates, because obviously the big 3 will be fast there, but how much of the big 3 do we see at the front? With that being said,
it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. All right, we teased it. We'll do it fast, John, because we can't tease the people and then not do it. We got ourselves a draft to do. Today we're going to be doing 3 picks apiece, snake drafting, with the big weekend for Penske Motorsports. We're going to draft our favorite NASCAR paint schemes from Penske all time. So for me, I'm going to go old school. I'm debating, because I have an old school one that I've always loved, and I have a newer one that I feel like if I don't take, you might.
Okay,
But,
so I have a couple of old school ones, so maybe that can influence kind of where you want to go.
I'm going to go ahead and open up with, this is going to be controversial, my favorite all time, the Jeremy Mayfield Mobil 1 Pegasus.
Yes. That was one I had, so that's a good pick.
You know me, John, I've always been a big fan of the Pegasus, and when I see him on Mobil 1 cars, it makes me a little nostalgic for that particular car. My sister was a fan of that car growing up, so I always like seeing that one. So for me, first pick, like I said, controversial, but Mayfield Pegasus for me.
I think that's a great one. I mean, Mobil 1 has had a lot of great looks over the years, and that iconic one with the red Pegasus at the back end of the car with the red spoiler, that's a great look. Mm-hmm. I'm going to – this is kind of like a 2-part one in a way, so I'll say the Miller Lite, or I think it's just the Miller number 2 Rusty Wallace black and yellow car. I'm obviously a big Steelers fan, so black and yellow is kind of my thing. So I'm a huge fan of that Rusty Wallace car, even though I never got to actually watch it race, growing up. Cause
you're thinking of the one with the red and blue like splash on the rear.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I had.
Because what's interesting about that, too, is that I'm going to kind of pair it up in a way with Ryan Blaney, because he runs an Advanced Auto Parts paint scheme, midnight black looking one that's basically... there's no blue in it, but it's basically the same thing.
It's the Advanced Auto car that you're thinking of.
Yep.
The Blaney one.
The Advanced Auto Parts one.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a bit of cheating to take both, but I think they're basically the same car. So that's going to be my first pick.
So you're going back to back with that one and then the throwback, the Advanced Auto.
If you want to call it one, you can,
sure.
And if not, then the other one I'll pick is Ryan Blaney had a yellow and red Advanced Auto Parts car back in the Gen 6 days, which I also like. So that can be my second pick, if you will.
Okay, I'm gonna go in a similar direction. This is gonna be a new school pick for me. It's also a Ryan Blaney car. We've seen it a while ago when Ryan Blaney started getting sponsored by Body Armor. I'm going to go with the Ryan Blaney Kobe Bryant Black Mamba Body Armor car, the purple and yellow.
Ooh, yeah. That was a good-looking car.
Yeah, look, I'm not a huge basketball fan, and I don't know too much about the history of the Lakers, but I do know Kobe Bryant was a pretty spectacular player, and he, I believe, had a stake in Body Armor before his passing there. So
I was not aware of that.
That was a big deal at the time for Ryan Blaney and that team, and the purple and yellow looks so cool. It does. I kind of wish they had done like purple wheels, but for those who have never seen it, Google Ryan Blaney Kobe Bryant car. It's definitely worth a watch. Worth checking out if you're into that thing. And then for my last pick, John, I gotta go old-fashioned. Give me the classic number 2 Rusty Wallace Blue Deuce. Mm-hmm. The Miller Lite Blue Deuce. You can't
Is
go
there a
wrong.
specific one? Is there a specific one that's your favorite?
I don't know. I don't really have a specific one that's my favorite because that was going to be my spot for the black and gold car that you took in round one.
Gotcha.
So
There's a
just
lot of good ones.
give me the OG. Give me
Mm-hmm.
the OG Blue Deuce Miller Lite, Rusty Wallace. You could take any of them going right up through Brad Keselowski's championship run with the pint and the beer on the side of the car.
I was gonna say, do you have a personal favorite of those cars? Because my personal favorite is probably that one you just talked about. Because I think Keselowski won the championship with that one. And then
I would say the one. What's the one I had? There's one where they ran with Dodge, and it had Miller Lite on it, and then it had like silver streaks on the side skirt, kind of going up on the main sidewall of the car. I don't remember the year. Let me see if I can find the year.
Was it a Kurt Busch year, or?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was a Wallace car. I just had it.
I'll let you look that up.
Go ahead.
Since you did that, I figured it would be correct to kind of go with a number 22 car, even though I think it's the weakest of the trio of cars in that collection, and granted also the newest. But I did choose what we've seen recently, the Joey Logano Pennzoil car that we usually see, oddly, ironically enough, at Vegas, is the car that kind of reminds you of the old Steve Park number 1 car, where he's got the angled stripes down the side of the car, and it's just yellow and black outside of the Pennzoil logo itself. So, a lot of Penske's paint schemes in recent years have been similar, whether it's the, I think Auto Trader, the orange and black car, or, I think PPG has been in the car. Obviously, Joey Logano does a lot of Shell Pennzoil too, but I'm talking just the Pennzoil car. That's my pick.
Gotcha.
My final pick.
For reference, the one I'm referring to was from the late 90s, where it said it was like a white hood and front fender, and it said Miller Lite on the hood. Like, it had the actual Miller Lite logo on the hood, but it said Miller Lite on the side panel, and it has like a red line above the side skirt. I like that one more just because the later ones, all they have is the Miller Lite logo on the front and the side. So I like the switch up, But all those Blue Deuce cars look pretty good. I always like, you mentioned in a previous episode, the Dodge cars always look cool.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go wrong with the Dodge cars. But yeah, I'm going to roll with, that OG Blue Deuce, the one from the late 90s, white hood, Rusty Wallace.
All hail Team Penske.
Yep. So, folks, let us know if we made a massive mistake. Some honorable mentions from me. The Josh Berry throwback car from, I believe it was last year. That's another one for me that I kind of liked.
Are you talking about the throwback weekend?
The green and yellow one.
Yeah, that was a really good looking car.
That's always a good look. There's
you can pick a Ryan Newman car.
Yeah, Ryan Newman was always nice. I like a lot of the Blaney cars nowadays. Those body armor ones are always nice.
I'll give a special shout out to being in the Rochester area back when they had the 77 car. At times they had Kodak on that car, so shout out Rochester.
Yeah, so yeah, let us know, folks, if we made a grievous error in there, and tell us what you think, or tell us yours, and we'd be happy to talk paint schemes. All right, John. That being said, it's been about an hour 20. I think we've about covered it today.
Alrighty.
So, shout out to everyone who's given us support so far. Once again, apologies for last week. The technical difficulties kind of hampered us on YouTube, but we're going to be back in action on YouTube this week. We'll be getting that up as soon as we can. There's no other news that broke today that I think we missed. So, should be fun. Las Vegas, getting to 1.5 miles, tire wear, all that stuff. So, let's see what happens. If you haven't already, like, subscribe our content over on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok. We have a Facebook page. We're always looking for more support. If you just want to chime in and say we don't know what we're talking about, great. We welcome that too. We love NASCAR discourse. It's why we're here. So thanks again, everyone, and we will see you next time on Haul in the Mail.